Well, I think it's extremely important for the mitigation movement to have people from different disciplines. You've got people from the business world, you've got people that are legislators in certain states, you've got scientists. So when you get people from different backgrounds together, you can learn from each other and come up with conclusions you would never come up with otherwise.
Mitigation is a win for everyone involved with it. It saves lives, it saves property, it saves money, and it prevents a very deadly cycle that we're engaged in this country. Building, Mother Nature destroys, rebuilding the same way is really the definition of insanity. Mitigation puts that to a stop, and it works for all.
What I'd like policymakers to understand, and policyholders for that matter, is that a preventative approach in the long run is much more efficient. And it's better because while it's harder to prove you've actually prevented the loss, if people don't suffer the loss of their homes, their communities, they're much better off. And in the long run, it's a lot less expensive for the government and for the private sector.
Well, I think the public is starting to understand that, and one of the things that's bringing it to them is just the price differentials, because companies are starting, in South Carolina, for instance, we mandate credits, that they have to give credits for mitigation. So all of a sudden there's a big interest in South Carolina, people calling up the insurance department, how do I get the credit, how do I get somebody to look at my house, which we've never had before. So I think the public's starting to get that message, and you know, that gets to be talk on the sidewalk when one guy's insurance is $400 and the other guy's is $700. Well, what'd you do to do that? So I think, you know, it'll take a while. I think it's going to take 2 or 3 years, but I think it's working.
I think the most important thing right now to educate people about what can be done is to give people a visual picture back of what the choice is. So if you look at a house destroyed by a hurricane where the house across the street survived intact, or if you look at a wind testing facility like the Wall of Wind, where you can demonstrate this window frame construction fails, this one survives, protecting a host of property and people inside that. The visual image like that, similar to what was done in the crash testing experience, can really bring that matter home. The Disney experience, I think, will be an example of a real-world experiment on how you can really transmit that information in a way that is meaningful. But I'd say it's similar to what's been done, it seems to me, on litter bug and seatbelt usage over the years, that it's almost a generational issue, that you focus with the right bit of information backed by the real science, and over time you can change the public attitude on the issue, and that's really what we need to do here.
Well, I think the most important thing for disaster insurance generally is that the rates need to be set at a fair and appropriate level that reflects the underlying risks, and really the whole policy effort has to build on that. Mitigation efforts and trying to provide incentives for mitigation don't make sense unless you price the underlying risk appropriately.
Well, I think first of all, the Americans need to be brought much more into the loop on the education side. What are risks? Maybe we talked a lot about rating, helping improve rating systems and getting those out into the public, maybe even down to the level of home purchases. We need to educate, the public needs to know a lot more about the risks of hurricanes and where the risks are not even everywhere by any means. They're more intense in certain places. We need to, National Wildlife Federation was concerned about global warming and the implications of that as we go forward. And so that kind of information needs to get out to the public. And then second, there are ways to mitigate existing buildings, new construction that would make people safer. That's very useful information. People don't like to hear if they don't have options to meet to make themselves and their families safer. So all of this kind of comes together in this movement, and I think it's very positive from that standpoint.
Well, I think it's important to recognize the leadership that came together to put the forum on. If it weren't for Renaissance Reinsurance and Weather Predict Consulting, we wouldn't be here. Everyone thought this was a great idea, but until Renaissance stepped up and said, let us lead it and we will be the conveners, what's happened as a result of that is now we have the Davos of mitigation, year 1, 2008, and we're looking forward to being a part of this moving forward for a very long time.